Hello, my name is Matthew Jackson. Welcome to another one of my videos. The title of this video is Communicating the Concept of Faith to an Unbeliever, Part 2. In Part 1, I talked about how to communicate faith to an unbeliever, and you've got to communicate it in such a way that you're not suggesting or telling the person you're talking to that you want them to commit intellectual suicide and throw your brains away, and that's anything but faith. And so I used two analogies to illustrate faith. One was the starting of a car. When you put your key in the ignition, when you do that, you are basically acting on faith that your car will start. And also I talked about the computer analogy as well. And the bottom line to my whole series is that the faith that we exercise is that the evangelical Christian, or any Christian for that matter, that exercises in their daily walk, when they practice their Christianity, their daily walk with God, is not much different than the faith that an atheist or agnostic exercises in their daily life. It's just a matter of where you direct that faith towards. So that's really the bottom line where I'm headed with all this. Now, since I did Part 1, there's a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Barton that responded to Part 1, and he gave a 2,000 word, a little over 2,000 word response to my first video. And I'm not going to read all 2,000 words in every point, but I want to summarize what his objections were. Basically, his contention is that my car analogy doesn't apply because it's based on testable experience. Okay, so he used the testable experience factor. So he said the starting of the car, because it's based on testable experience, is pretty much the opposite of faith. He says in your car analogy, faith would be telling a person the car will start when inserting and turning the key, while not letting them try or witness the event, so they will have no way to know if it's actually true. Okay, so what Kenneth is doing basically is he's narrowing down the concept of faith, where I'm trying to broaden the concept of faith. Near the end of his response, he says, having faith just because it feels good is anti-intellectual. I'd like to be able to eat all I want without any weight or health consequences, but simply wanting it to be so won't make it so. And I would agree with that. And I would contend that faith is not wishful thinking or just believing. Okay, so faith is much broader than that. I went onto the online Webster's Dictionary, and I printed up their definition of faith. Now, faith is a word, is a very broad term, and it has multiple definitions. And theologically, faith is very broad and has a lot of depth to it as well, because there's a lot of scriptures that address faith, and there's a lot of books that have been written about faith. But let me just read to you the definitions to sort of broaden your view of what faith is from the dictionary standpoint, the definition. Here's some definitions. Okay, the first one, strong belief or trust in someone or something. A belief in the existence of God, strong religious feelings or beliefs. A system of religious beliefs. Allegiance to duty or a person, loyalty, fidelity to one's promises, sincerity of intentions. Belief and trust in and loyalty to God, belief in the traditional doctrines of a religion. Now here's the definition that Kenneth would like. Firm belief in something for which there is no proof. I'd call that blind faith, but complete trust, something that is believed, especially with strong conviction, especially a system of religious beliefs. So you can see that that's a pretty broad definition if you read Webster's definition of faith. But when I'm talking about faith, I'm talking about more the first one that I read, where we talk about a strong belief or trust in someone or something. Now, let me ask you something. There are things that you trust in, and there's people that you trust in. Do you trust in things or people who are not dependable, who do not show a track record of reliability, i.e., testable experience? No, I don't. The reason I know that my car is going to start and when I get out of here is because it has a track record of being dependable. There's a geyser in Yellowstone National Park that goes off several times a day. You know what they call that? The name of that geyser is? It's called Old Faithful. Why do you think they call Old Faithful Old Faithful? Because it goes off several times a day without fail. Okay, it doesn't go off once a year or once every 6 months or once a decade. It goes off several times a day. That's why they call it Old Faithful. It's reliable. It's dependable. Testable experience. Okay. So, using the parachute analogy, if a skydiver jumps out of an airplane, he is acting on faith. He is taking an act of faith when he jumps out of that airplane because he's acting on faith that when he pulls that ripcord, that chute's going to deploy. And most of the time it does, 99.999%. Okay, they have a very parachute technology is what it is today, is very reliable. And if that chute doesn't deploy, guess what? They got a backup. They got plan B. Okay, so now let's take a guy who's in an airplane and jumps out without a parachute and expects to land safely. Now, do you think that guy's acting on faith? Well, I don't. I think he's acting on stupidity. I think he's a fool. Okay? So that's not faith. That's blind faith. That's craziness. Okay? So the blind faith and expecting something without no proof, with just wishful thinking, that's more what Kenneth's concept of faith is, and it's more typical of the atheist and agnostic. Now, I'm not saying Kenneth is an atheist or agnostic. And Kenneth, I know you're watching this video, so I don't mean to misrepresent your position or your label or whatever. I don't want to misrepresent you, but certainly your logic and your reasoning are very much like an atheist and agnostic, where my definition of faith is more broader, more objective, more intellectual than it's given credit for. Now, I want to tell you a true story, and it's a true story from the Word of God. It's in 3 of the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. A synagogue ruler came to Jesus and told him that his daughter died and asked him to come to his house and lay his hand on his daughter. Then if he does that, she'll come to life. So Jesus consented. So while he was on his way to the synagogue ruler's house, a woman with an issue of blood sought Jesus, sought healing from Jesus, but she was unable to get an audience with Jesus because Jesus was in a crowd on his way to the synagogue ruler's house. She couldn't talk to him. So she went to plan B. She said to herself, well, if I could just touch the edge of his cloak, the hem of his garment, just get a piece of his clothing, maybe that would be enough to heal me of my issue of blood. And that's what happened. She pressed through the crowd just enough to touch his clothes. And it worked. It healed her. Okay? When that happened, Jesus felt power and virtue leaving him. And he asked his disciples, who touched me? And his disciples said, well, Lord, there's people all around here. You're being pressed by the crowd. It could be anybody. He says, no. There's somebody here that touched me with a different reason. He turned around, and there the woman was. The woman was scared. She fell at Jesus' feet. And she says, I just wanted to, I had this ailment. I wanted to be healed. That's all. I didn't mean anything harm or anything. And Jesus said, no. Take peace. Be at peace. Your faith has made you whole. That's what he told the woman. Your faith has made you whole. And he said, go in peace. And that was the end of that. And that is a true story from the Word of God. Now, I want to ask you a question. The faith that woman had that Jesus talked about, what kind of faith was it? Was it the blind, jump out of an airplane without a parachute kind of faith that Kenneth seems to think faith is? Or Was it the objective, testable evidence, reliability, dependability type of faith, the broader definition that I'm talking about? Well, I'll submit to you it's the latter. And I'll tell you why. She knew who Jesus was by reputation. Jesus had a reputation. By that time, he was a celebrity. He had a reputation for performing miracles. He had healed blind people. He had healed lepers. He was about to go raise someone from the dead. And so he's healed crippled people who couldn't walk, all sorts of people. So he had that reputation, and she heard about that. So maybe it's not testable experience from a laboratory scientific standpoint, but from an anecdotal standpoint, he had the reputation. She did not just single out any man in the crowd to touch. There's a reason she touched Jesus specifically. So that faith that she was exercising, it was based on something. It was based on Jesus' reputation and reliability and dependability of being a miracle worker. That's why she did that. Okay, so it wasn't blind faith. So, having said all that, I think I'll end this session and have a good day. Thanks for watching.